Greetings and welcome there, people of YouTube. I wanted to discuss in detail the biblical views on rape, which can arguably be found in Deuteronomy 22 verses 28 through 29, as these two verses are very hotly contested by both theists and atheists. As an atheist, this passage is indicative of the excessive barbarity and misogyny found within the Bible, something which theists are all too keen to brush under the rug, as this idea challenges our modern notions of equality and morality. Therefore, I hope to reveal this, the Bible's dark secret. The New International Version of the passage reads, "If a man happens to meet a virgin who is not pledged to be married, and rapes her, and they are discovered, he shall pay her father 50 shekels of silver. He must marry the young woman, for he has violated her. He can never divorce her as long as he lives." The focus of these discussions is focused around the translations of Torfaz Shorkab. There is little denial that the latter, Shorkab, describes the action of intercourse. It is the word Torfaz which is hotly debated. There are the generic terms which include to catch, handle, lay hold of, take hold, seize, and wield. But we have to take into consideration the Hebrew grammar used, as it offers a vital insight into the intended meaning. The grammar used in this case along Torfaz is qual. This offers two groups of more specific terms when used in conjunction with Torfaz. The first set involves interactions with people, the second set with items. I shall set aside the latter set for now, instead concentrating on the first. When referring to actions involving another individual, the word torfaz can translate to lay hold of, seize, arrest, and catch. From here, we must discern the overall impact of these translations when used along Shorkab. The simplest way may be to present all four lines and distinguish individually their meanings. So we have, if a man happens to meet a virgin who is not pledged to be married, and lays hold of her, and lays with her, and they are discovered. If a man happens to meet a virgin who is not pledged to be married, and seizes her, and lays with her, and they are discovered. If a man happens to meet a virgin who is not pledged to be married, and arrests her, and lays with her, and they are discovered. If a man happens to meet a virgin who is not pledged to be married, and catches her, and lays with her, and they are discovered. The last three phrases are clearly entailing rape, as seen by the forceful and violent nature of the verbs used, i.e. seizing, arresting, and catching when involving another. Only in the first is there truly an issue with vagueness, being a neutral phrase which could mean either rape or passionate, consensual sex. Some will argue that therefore the way in which the passage is intended is unknowable and therefore should not be used in discussion. The problem with this is that the majority of the words do insinuate rape, with a singular neutral term. This in itself suggests that the neutral term is more likely to lean towards that of being rape. This is not the only evidence suggesting this to be so. The grammar qual, when used along Torfaz, is utilized when speaking from the perspective of the person acting. Similarly, the Hebrew grammar of nifal is the opposite, describing the action from the opposing view. If the terms from qual were forceful, we'd expect to find the same for nifal, and that is exactly how it is. Under the term torfaz nifal, we get the phrases to be seized, be arrested, be caught, be taken, be captured, none of which contain the vagueness of lays hold of, consolidating the idea that this passage can and most likely does in fact refer back to rape, with a seemingly reasonable degree of certainty. To still claim that the term is too vague is to create a vacuum, making the entirety of the Bible too vague, allowing for no rational discussion or criticism. It is a similar tactic of pulling the plug on discussion, as is used by people when losing, stating that the existence of the universe itself is questionable and should be viewed as acting in the same dishonest manner. Another common argument is the fact that torfaz in Genesis 4:21 is used alongside the Hebrew grammar qual when Jubal is described playing the harp. If you will remember, I mentioned earlier in the video that there were two lists of words when the usage of qual. The latter is utilized only when in conjunction with interactions involving inanimate objects. They are to grasp in order to wield itself, or use skillfully. Displaying that the usage in Genesis 4:21 in no way clashes with that in Deuteronomy 22:28. That is, of course, unless you're suggesting that the man wielded the woman like a musical instrument. A further criticism comes from Exodus 22 verses 16 through 17, often viewed as Deuteronomy 22 verses 28 through 29's mirror law. Yet, in this version it states that the father may reject the proposal. The argument is that the lack of this allowance would somehow be a step back in women's rights and therefore cannot be the case. The problem with this is the presupposition that laws never degrade. We know this to be false in the Bible, as shown by the commandment, "Thou shalt murder." Yet it was not long before Moses had slain 3,000 upon the mountainside. The fact is, the Bible does not make a lot of sense, containing contradictions like no other book. That is a problem for the believer, not the skeptic. Finally, there is also the objection brought up as a result of the passages previous to this one in Deuteronomy 22 verses 25 through 27. The New International Version of the passage reads, "But if out in the country a man happens to meet a young woman pledged to be married and rapes her, only the man who has done it shall die. Do nothing to the woman, she has committed no sin deserving death." This case is like that of someone who attacks and murders a neighbour, for the man found the young woman out in the country, and though the betrothed woman screamed, there was no one to rescue her. Once again, it is the word shorkab that makes an appearance to connotate the act of sex, but instead of torfaz, korzak is used to describe this act. Both torfaz and korzak share similar meanings, yet apologists argue that the change in usage clearly shows how the first is rape but the latter is not. Had they both been the same subject, they would have both used the same word. The first problem is with korzak, hifil being the Hebrew grammar utilized. Even with this reduction, korzak hifil can still mean to make strong, strengthen, to make firm, to display strength, to make severe, to support, to repair, to prevail, to have, take or keep, and finally to hold or contain. The term korzak hifil is far more vague than that of torfaz, yet there is almost no denial of Deuteronomy 22, 25 through 27 referencing rape due to its favourable appeal. What is also important to note is the fact that the latter passages are shorter, containing less detail. This may have been done to avoid repetition, for example, of the lines, "She has committed no sin deserving death," as neither passages call for death. This could have been done to save parchment paper, which back in these days would have been expensive. This would also call for a new sentence structure, and with it, new language. So the usage of differing words does in no way exclude one not as rape, and there are many other ways that it can be accounted for. What is more is that Deuteronomy 22 verses 25 through 27 supports the idea that passages 28 through 29 are discussing rape. The reason for this is the fact that the mentioning on the virgin status of the woman. The first discusses a woman who is taken outside the city walls yet is already married, whilst the latter discusses one who is yet to be betrothed. The near identical appearance of the passages tell us that these two are interlinked. To remove one due to being uncertain on its meaning is to do the same to another. However, what about the difference in punishment? In the first, the man is to die, yet in the latter, he is merely to pay a sum of money to the father. The reason for this is simple. It is all to do with money. This was a time and culture where the idea of a woman as an individual was non-existent. A woman was either taken by a husband or the property of her father, as shown by Exodus 21 verses 7 onwards, which discusses the rules of selling your daughter into slavery. The fact is, a woman who'd lost her virginity had little value in comparison to one who still retained it, especially in marriage negotiations. Therefore, by raping the woman, the man had effectively diminished the value of his daughter and was therefore expected to pay for the bride price, and relieve the father of any further loss of money which could have occurred had she remained in his household, consuming his food, etc. It is an outdated look on the world, yet existed till even after Europe had passed through the Dark Ages, showing that it is not an unlikely view at the time. So to summarize overall, the language and translations seem to lean towards the passage referring to rape. The law fits within the context of the time period and women's rights at the time, and finally, the word usage does not clash with other passages using the same word and even the grammar. Everything is poised, pointing at the idea that the passage does revolve around rape. But what are the implications of this conclusion? If we went by currency, 50 Israeli shekels are just a mere £8. This, however, would be intellectually dishonest on my part to assert this. Therefore, I shall use the shekel as a measurement of weight, which it originally was. 50 shekels of silver on today's market would be worth around 400 British pounds or 600 US dollars on top range estimates. But surely these laws are outdated and should no longer be used. Well, Numbers 23:19, Malachi 3:6 and James 1:17 are all quoted as stating God is unchanging. If so, shouldn't it be the same for his holy laws? Not only this, but according to Matthew 5:17-20, Jesus himself spoke out, making sure that his followers understood this to be so, and that if they failed to follow the old laws, they would not enter heaven. Therefore, it is truly every Christian's holy obligation to ensure that every raped woman is to marry her rapist once he has paid the bride price. So I ask you, why is this not so? Thank you for watching. This is Essence of Thought. Out.